And we're going to admit everybody. Welcome, folks. We'll get started momentarily. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the Open Texas 2024 conference. This town hall plenary session is going to be a great way to start our day. Glad you've all joined us. The Open Texas Conference is sponsored and convened by two coordinating organizations, the Texas Digital Library and the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. My name is Christy Park. I am the Executive Director of the Texas Digital Library, and I'm going to serve as the moderator for today's session and get us started. We welcome you to introduce yourself and ask questions in the chat. Please feel free to keep your webcam on. We'd love to see your faces, but do keep your mic muted unless you're speaking. And please be aware that we are recording the session today. Recorded sessions will be available within the conference attendee hub for 30 days after the conference, and then after that they'll be accessible through the Open Texas YouTube channel. I'll put a link to that in the chat momentarily. I'll also place a link to our conference code of conduct in chat for your information. So this session is the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board Town Hall. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Kylah Torre and Carrie Gitz to get us started. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Christy. So I think Carrie's going to get our slides up. Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited about this town hall. And I think the first thing that we're going to do is explain why we're doing a town hall at this point. And so for that, I'm going to ask our Assistant Commissioner of Digital Learning, Dr. Michelle Singh, to talk through why we decided to do a town hall around OER at Open Texas this year.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Dr. Torre. And so it's wonderful to be with you all again. And why a town hall? Why now? Why are we engaging in this? Well, we want to make sure that we harness our collective expertise in this rapidly evolving landscape that we find ourselves in today. There is so much going on, so much change. We want to make sure that we're still able to foster a collaborative space where sharing ideas will really demonstrate the OER and emerging technology/AI intersection. We want to continue to lean into the robust Texas digital community that we have seen has the power to change the way that we approach higher education. We together can shape the future of open education and how it impacts the stakeholders of Texas and beyond. We need to educate others and increase awareness that the larger open agenda, OER, open pedagogy, are the strongest foundation for how we approach engagement with emerging technologies. As we've mentioned, we are at such a pivotal moment right now in higher education, but specifically for open ed. AI presents both challenges and opportunities for the way that we approach higher education, but also has a direct impact on open education and the awareness and the strong foundation that it can provide as we navigate these emerging technologies. Our skills as OER practitioners are so crucial in guiding responsible AI integration with open principles. We together can shape the future if we have conversations with each other, if we learn from each other's experience, truly living the idea of the larger open ideal. In that same spirit, we want to expand our biennial landscape research. The research has served as a core influencer for the direction for our state for years. It is now time to also use it to plan for what is on the horizon. We stress this idea of institutional agility and individual agility, but to accomplish that, we have to empower ourselves with forecasting data. We have to start incorporating new trends and the impacts that OER has already had on our institutions and what difference it can make in the future. We have to together identify new opportunities for OER in technology-enhanced educational environments, even if we don't necessarily know what those educational enhancements will look like next week, next month, in a couple of years. We have to use the technologies that are emerging to deepen our understanding of OER, adoption, and impact across Texas. We pride ourselves in this division of creating this larger resources, larger portfolio that is user-designed, and that you are at the core of. Our goal is to ensure that you find value in the resources that we are providing and that you see yourself in the value that in the resources we're creating. Those that we serve have always been and will always remain the center focus of our work. We stand behind the idea and the ideal of resources being designed for educators, by educators, for institutions, by institutions, and we commit to continue that practice. Lastly, we will always emphasize open communication. Our goal is to foster transparent dialogue about the direction of Open Ed in Texas. We want to make sure that we can share best practices with each other, continue collaborating and empowering each other, supporting each other from regardless of what area we are in Texas, because Texas has one of the best think tanks that there is in the nation. We have so many different opinions, so many practitioners that are leaders in this field. Let's lean into it and let's capitalize on it. Together, we will define the future of higher education and the role that open education plays in achieving it. So let's do this. And now I'll hand it over to Carrie to continue with our program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carrie Gitz, and I'm a director in the Division of Digital Learning at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and I am joined by my colleague, Dr. Kylah Torre, Senior Director in the Division of Digital Learning. We'll be serving as your overall facilitators today, but we'll be supported by a host of volunteers who will walk you through and guide you through a discussion in breakout rooms a little later in the session. So our plan for this morning is to look at, we're going to begin the town hall by looking at a national conversation on open education with several special guests. We will transition to a conversation about where we are with open education and why we are at such a pivotal moment for open education, both locally, nationally, and globally. And as you heard Dr. Singh say just moments ago, we are really at an important moment in open education, not only in Texas, but on the national landscape as well. Dr. Torre will then delve into trends relevant to Texas open education, and we'll look together at a couple of big questions related to open education. From there, we're going to go into breakout rooms, into smaller discussion groups. Each of those rooms will have a discussion facilitator, and we will spend the majority of the time in today's session in small discussion groups. So with that, I am going to introduce who our guest speakers are that will be leading the national conversation, and we'll turn it over to them shortly. So we are joined by three guest speakers today who represent the national perspective. We have Nicole Allen, who is the Director of Open Education at SPARC, Liliana Diaz, who is a Senior Policy Analyst at WICHE, and Dr. Kathy Essmiller, who has multiple hats, but she is also on the steering committee and the secretary for DOERS. She's also an assistant professor and the coordinator of Open OK State and an OER librarian at Oklahoma State University. Collectively, their conversation that they're going to present to you today is presenting on the work from a collaboration among 4 regional compacts who work together with DOERS and SPARC. And earlier this year, they invited members of the open education community to join them for an open conversation about the potential need for the U.S. National Open Education Strategy, and discuss how that might align, how we might all better align to collaborate and advance shared priorities. The conversation is actually going to continue this month with 3 additional conversations in a new series, and we'll let them tell you all about that and the plans for the national conversation. So at this time, I will turn it over to our guest presenters.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to start us out with some background, then turn it over to Liliana to talk about the outcomes of the webinar series we organized last spring. And then Kathy will wrap us up with a discussion of next steps. And hi, I'm Nicole Allen, Director of Open Education for SPARC. So to start us out with some background, the national conversations about open education strategy really came out of this realization, as Dr. Singh said, that open education and education generally is at a pivotal moment. On one hand, open educational resources and practices have grown rapidly over the last 20 plus years, both here in the US and internationally. We have things like a formal UNESCO OER recommendation. We have a federal grant program for open textbooks and many robust state efforts, Texas, of course, being one of them. And that's not to mention the many organizations and individuals who are doing incredible work to benefit students through reducing costs, increasing relevance of materials, and taking back ownership over the materials that we use in our classrooms. But that said, there are many challenges facing open education. The shift to automatic textbook billing or inclusive access programs has fundamentally changed how course materials are procured. And in many ways, the textbook industry has co-opted and without meaningfully or sustainably solving for the affordability efforts for OER. And the impacts of some of this are starting to show. The latest survey that was released last month or earlier this month by Bayview Analytics found that OER awareness and adoption have declined slightly for the first time after nearly a decade of annual increases. And even though this is just one data point, it really underscores how the landscape is shifting and how we advocate for open education and in order to achieve those benefits for students needs to evolve. And this is especially true as generative AI becomes more pervasive, and open education really needs to figure out, how to grow with and harness the benefits, but also navigate and potentially be a force in defending against some of the consequences as these new technologies just become a reality. So with all of this, so the collaboration between my organization, SPARC, the 4 interstate regional higher ed compacts, and DOERS developed early last year, where at first our focus was how can we align our respective work, recognizing that we represent national networks, to address some of these challenges facing open education in this moment, to better fill gaps and help harness the incredible power of our communities to be able to do more for students. But we quickly realized that it really needed to be a much larger conversation that included other amazing organizations in this space and people doing open education work at all levels. So last spring, we organized a webinar series around the question, do we need a national open education strategy? And we framed it that way in the hopes of provoking a discussion, and provoke a discussion it did. And the goal was really to think about, how can we all work together to fill gaps and do more than just the sum of our parts, recognizing that there's so much potential in the work that we do every day through open education to benefit students. So to share a little bit more about how those conversations went, I will say, I will turn it over to Liliana to take us into the next slide.
Thanks, Nicole. So hopefully some of you joined us for one of our first 3 community conversations. We were hosted these throughout, can't even remember the month, but it's been a couple months, but we had over 250 participants that joined us for these community conversations. And we had representation from 48 states and a few Canadian provinces. So it was exciting to hear from folks from across the nation, as well as our Canadian colleagues and partners. And we had representation from folks that do a variety of tasks. So we had instructional designers, we had faculty, we had administrators, we had librarians. I know for some of them, we even had students join us. So it was exciting to hear from folks that touch open education in a variety of different ways and different contexts, because then we can get a full picture of what some of those challenges and gaps are. And there was recognition that this was a small sample size compared to the membership of the open education community. Hence why we believe should be more outreach needed. And I know Kathy will talk about additional opportunities for folks to continue engaging in these conversations. If we go on to the next slide, we want to share a little bit about the findings from the first 3 community conversations. Now, it's not all the findings that we're sharing with you today for the sake of time, but you can find these on the WICHE website. They're posted, and I can put a link in the chat after my slides are done. So you can go ahead and look at the recordings of some of these community conversations. So for the next slide, one of the things that we asked folks that attended these community conversations was, what priorities or objectives do you want a national strategy to achieve? After we collected all the data from the 3 first conversations, 5 strategies emerged from, a lot of other ideas. And these were really kind of the ones that kept coming over and over and appearing in the data. So funding and sustainability, we need funding to be able to sustain and support our continued efforts, as well as for states that maybe want to, or systems and institutions that want to continue and expand their OER efforts, or even bring open education OER efforts onto their campuses, but they can't do so without funding and sustainability strategies. The other is that we need coordination and collaboration. There's a lot of us that are unfortunately duplicating efforts because we're not engaged and connected to each other in ways where we know who's doing what, and we can leverage the work that others are doing that we can then utilize to remix or update or share. So there needs to be some strategy for how we coordinate better and how we collaborate to minimize duplication of efforts. Additionally, there was conversation about having a central place, whether it's a website or a repository or a place where we could just share communications and we can all find things. I know when I work with folks and they're, hey, where can I find this? There's usually more than 2, 3, even 5 places to find the same information. What would it look like to have one central location where we can find this information? Because there is a lot of overlap. The 4th was that we want to make sure that this is a community agreed upon strategy. So if there are vision and frameworks and standards developed, it needs to be informed by the community and led by the community, because we're all in this and we all have equal say to this work. And finally, one of the objectives that we want a national strategy to achieve is legislation and policy advocacy. Now, we understand that different states have different contexts. So there's some folks that don't want legislation, but they definitely want some sort of coalescing or policy to be able to support these. And others really just want their system to, and their institutions to just acknowledge that the work is happening and that people need support to continue the work they're already doing. So what would this look like, whether through policy or even just conversations with those leaders that have those levers to be able to fund and sustain our work? Now, if we go into the next slide, you'll see the other side of the coin. We thought it would be equally important to ask what we wouldn't want from a national strategy. I think that's an equally valid question. So again, 5 areas emerge. So the first is to acknowledge that we don't want mandates, which is an interesting relationship with the policy and legislation piece. But I think if we have conversations as to how we want this work to emerge, where we want this work to go, we want to acknowledge that not everyone is keen or interested in mandates. And again, it goes back to our state context. So I don't live in Texas, but I'm sure Texas is a very different environment than Colorado, where I live. So we want to acknowledge that where you're located matters, and we need to adhere to those contexts. The second is that folks don't want a loss of academic freedom, and we don't even want that to be a perception at all, because this isn't about the loss of academic freedom, but we do want to make sure that we frame and we approach this work in a way that helps folks that have those fears that if we create a national coordination or national strategy, then they'll experience the loss of academic freedom, because that's not the case, and that is not the goal of this work. The third is that a one-size-fits-all strategy doesn't take the uniqueness of each area and state. And I think I said that when I was talking about mandates. We have to take into consideration the context of where our institutions are located, our systems are located, and our states into this work. Fourth, we really don't want to continue duplicating efforts, and we don't want whatever we create to exacerbate those issues. So we want to make sure that we have conversations, that we know who's doing what, to make sure that we're not duplicating, again, this work through this national coordination strategy. And the fourth is that we don't want to replicate systems of power and marginalization in this work. And so we have to make sure that we are having those frank and honest conversations of how we address this work in equitable ways. Now, if we go on to the next slide, which is my last slide, through those initial three community conversations, an initial framework was developed. So in this initial framework, there is a purpose statement, strategic objectives that have been outlined, as well as some guiding principles for how we enact and how we engage in this work, and then potential program activities of what this national coordination would actually like to accomplish. Now, if you want to hear more about this initial framework, I will pass on my slide to Kathy, who will tell you about how you can get involved.
Excellent. Thank you, Liliana. And yes, you'll hear how you can get involved, whether you want to or not. Here we go. But I love the conversation we're hearing so far here in Texas. And it's exciting to me to hear how it aligns with what came through in the national conversation and the conversations we continue to have. So we've had already one webinar bringing people together to build on each other's energy and expertise, as was spoken of earlier. And we have two more coming in October. And I think someone's going to drop a link into the chat for how to read about those, sign up for them. You'll get a link to kind of a proposed idea for an idea as we move forward with national coordination. You'll see some shifts in language as we've been responsive to each other and what each other needs. And I think that you'll find in your small group conversations, one of the questions prepares you very well for the type of input we're looking for in these webinars. When we break out into small groups in the webinars, one of the questions is, how do you see national coordination impacting you and your work? And you have a similar question today in your small group. So I hope you really spend that time together coming to some answers, and then make it to these webinars, or at least attend this share out webinar on October 29th, and let us see how we can all strengthen each other's work. The horizon in Texas is huge, right? And you're having fantastic conversations in this conference. I noticed yesterday so many about community and momentum. Today, one of them, the Texan tapestry. What a lovely idea that then hopefully we can also merge into what's happening in the national conversation as we work together. I think, did we get the link dropped in? I wasn't watching the chat, but we need to sign off on our portion so you can get to the important work in your whole other country of Texas. But we look forward to seeing you at the webinars as we build out together. Thank you.
Looks like we got the link in there. Yeah. Well, thank you, Nicole, Liliana, Kathy. The national conversation was really an inspiration for this town hall, and we appreciate you all being here, and not only being willing to present the information, but also being willing to be part of the conversation in the breakout rooms. So thank you all very much for coming and telling us all about what you're doing. So I want to frame the sort of Texas lens on this conversation about this pivotal moment for OER, as we're calling it, by starting with a little bit just a brief overview of kind of the history of OER in Texas. I'm going to do this in very broad strokes, so forgive me if I leave anyone out. First of all, I guess I should introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Kylah Torre. I am the Senior Director of Digital Learning at the Coordinating Board, and I also have been working on the OER work at the coordinating board since we started it back in 2017. So I'm very excited to see the progression of sort of statewide OER work in Texas and where we go from here. So this is just a wide lens view on key OER milestones in Texas, beginning kind of with OpenStax and Coral in the early 2000s, moving through some Achieving the Dream grant initiatives and others, and then legislation that was passed in 2017 that started our state-funded grant program and began what would be eventually the creation of the OER Texas repository. We also, in 2017, began our biennial landscape analyses, where we do a survey every couple of years of all of the Texas institutions and the OER work that they're doing. And I'm going to present a little bit of the data from the third survey in this presentation. And that is now, the report on that is now available on OER Texas. So if you're interested and you want to dive deep into that, that is available for you. We at the coordinating board, we've used the results of that biennial landscape analysis to inform a lot of the work that we've done statewide with OER. And we've also used it to let us know what other research questions we should be asking. So in 2022, we did a regional OER analysis of the 10 higher education regions in Texas, a gap analysis of high impact courses leading to credentials of value that ended in the high impact course hub that's on OER Texas. If you're looking for course materials for those particular courses, that 25 courses that were chosen for that. We also in 2022 created the Texas OER Playbook, which is focused on systems change around OER and open education at institutions. So how do you build an open education program at your institution kind of from the ground up? Or how do you scale one that you already have? And we've had other various efforts related to that playbook as well, including some academies and a course that's now available on OER Texas. In 2020, November of 2020, the Division of Digital Learning was created at the coordinating board, which you can imagine what was happening at the time that might have inspired the creation of a Division of Digital Learning. But we are a small but mighty team that you can see on the right-hand side there. And we have the mission of providing leadership and advocacy for digital learning in higher education and promoting, sustaining, and advancing a quality digital learner experience, positioning Texas as a world leader, and resulting in globally competitive, digitally proficient citizens. We have the goals of advocating for, building capacity for, and recognizing digital excellence, and all of the open education work that's done at the coordinating board is under our purview. So that includes advocating for, building capacity for, and recognizing excellence within open education. As I alluded to before, we try to base all of our work in research and user design. And so we have grants, we have some professional learning academies and other events. We have large community events like Open Texas, and we have other resources that all are sort of interconnected with the idea of being able to build capacity and scale OER work that's being done in Texas. They're all based in the landscape research and the other research that we've done. And I'll talk a little bit about the sort of trends of that. But one of our projects that hopefully you are familiar with at this point is OER Texas. This is a state-funded repository of OER for Texas higher education. It was launched in September of 2020, and it has had since then, I actually think it might be now over 600,000 users in over all states and continents. We have over 14,000 resources that have been added to the repository, and many of them are authored with using the tool that's within the repository itself. And that OER Texas also includes places where you can join groups or hubs, where you can find collections of resources that other institutions have used. And so we hope that it's a a community spot where the Texas higher education community can come together around their open education work. We have a variety of other resources and services that have come out of the research and as we try to sort of scale the work that we're doing in open education. Obviously, Open Texas is the one that we're talking about right now. But we also have various academies for different skill levels within OER, from sort of core elements to how do you create. We have the OER Nursing Essentials or ONE project, which we partnered with OpenStax to create 8 openly licensed nursing textbooks. And I believe that the 8th one is about to be published any day now. So you can find those on OER Texas. We have just launched the Texas OER Fellows program. And so actually the year 1 fellows just kicked off yesterday as part of Open Texas. And the founding fellows were working together all this summer to develop the curriculum for that fellowship program. And we hope to have that as an ongoing leadership development program for OER leaders. We also have a variety of hubs that include lots and lots of different types of resources on OER Texas, including now one that we're building on artificial intelligence and adapting to innovation. So that's a lot of where we've been, right? Kind of up to where we are now. And so why are we calling this a pivotal moment? Because there's a lot of movement happening, right? There's a lot of sort of uncertainty happening. There are emerging technologies like AI. There are questions around automatic billing models and what does that do to open education? There's federal rulemaking around opt-in, opt-out, and other elements of digital learning and quality assurance of digital learning. And then the open education movement, as we've seen in national and also our state research, is kind of at this point where we're not new anymore, right? We're established. So then what is kind of the next step to that? So I'm gonna just say that our thoughts about this being kind of a pivotal moment in OER for Texas were really borne out in the 3rd biennial landscape survey that we did and has just been released on OER Texas. I'm sure somebody will put that link in the chat. So at this point, OER has been adopted at virtually every Texas institution. So there are a very small minority of institutions that are not really using OER, but for the most part, everyone to some extent is using OER or has some sort of OER policy or program. We're gaining momentum when it comes to data collection around OER, so trying to prove the success, right, of this work. But also, we're starting to look beyond textbook savings into more institutions are gathering more data around student success metrics, like pass rates, like persistence, even around sort of quality of teaching and student engagement. So we're kind of, the lens is shifting from affordability to more student success. And our institutions are also recognizing that of course, there's a potential of OER to enhance pedagogical practices, right? So this is, we're seeing a growth in people indicating that the importance of OER is around pedagogical practices and not only affordability. So we're looking at things like student engagement and faculty academic freedom and customized materials. So the benefits of OER, we're getting a wider lens on what those are sort of across the board. So what we're trying to do kind of with this town hall as a beginning, and then with some expanded landscape research to inform our work moving forward, is to try to change the narrative around open education, sort of statewide, from barriers to what are the opportunities, from thinking about affordability only to thinking about student success as well on a in a broad way. And from reacting to what is happening on the national and state scale to sort of anticipating and how can we be agile in adapting to that. So our big question that we are asking right now is how we design and support the future of open education in Texas. So this is around the sort of going from reacting to adapting. We want to think through how do we decide and design what we want the future of open education in Texas to be, and then what kind of statewide supports are needed in order to support our work towards that future. So in this town hall, we want to take the opportunity to reimagine how we educate, how we learn, how we drive change, how we innovate, how we advocate, and how we lead through open education in Texas. And with that, I think we wanted to give you all a good amount of time to have discussion groups. So what is going to happen is that we are going to open breakout rooms. You will be moved automatically into a breakout room. And then your facilitator will join you very quickly thereafter. They have some big questions for you. And also there's a Padlet. Maybe we can put the link to the Padlet in chat. So even if your facilitator takes a minute, you can even get started looking at those questions and filling in some comments on that Padlet. And then we'll come back together at the end, just for about 5 minutes at the end of the session to talk about next steps and where we're going with this information and with this sort of town hall format. And I think that is that. So I'm gonna open breakout rooms and go have a fun discussion. Can't wait to hear what y'all are talking about. Here we go. It always happens. I saw in the Padlet that you were having fantastic discussions. So exciting. Can't wait to go through and see it more. So just as kind of a wrap up for us, this is not the end of this conversation. So first of all, we really want you to encourage other Open Texas participants that you might be hanging out with in the next couple of days, and really any other Texas open education advocates who you know to contribute to that Padlet. So you can use that link, and we will also have it available in CVent if there are other participants in Open Texas who would like to also answer those questions and add to the Padlet. Second, we are holding a second Open Education Town Hall on November 7th during Texas Digital Learning Week. So we hope that you will stay tuned and attend that one as well, or send your friends or whatever you like. But we'll be sending out information on that through all of our various channels, including the Texas Digital Learning News and Events group on OER Texas, which hopefully somebody can put that in chat. If you join that group, you'll be updated on all the very fun things that we do, including Texas Digital Learning Week, which will include the town hall, but also a lot of other sessions on digital learning and OER. So stay tuned for that, and we hope you will join us. Other than that, I just really want to say thank you to all of you for coming and participating in this conversation. I think it's really exciting, and we're really, really excited about having a community discussion around what we need to be asking and what we need to be looking at, and how we can design the future of open education in Texas. I also want to thank again our guests, Nicole Allen, Liliana Diaz, and Kathy Essmiller for coming and talking with us about the national conversation. And I hope you all will also attend one of those national conversations that they're having coming up. I think one is next week, and so we can put that link in chat again as well. So all right, well, thank you all. I think the next session is at 11:15, so hopefully somebody's going to nod at me and tell me that that's correct. Yes, 11:15, and so enjoy, take a break, and we will see you at 11:15. Thank you so much.